listeners. It's Friday, December 6th, 2024, and you're tuned in to Voiceover Work, an audiobook sampler. Where do you listen? Today, we're diving deep into the world of mindful listening with a special chapter-by-chapter preview of Patrick King's book, Mindful Listening: How to Be Present, Intentional, and Empathetic. Over the next few minutes, we'll be sharing short excerpts from each chapter. Get ready to be inspired and equipped with practical tools to elevate your communication skills. Chapter 1. What are we really doing when we listen? Cultivating listening readiness. In this chapter, the first task of listening is to be prepared, receptive, and willing. Imagine that you're catching up with an old friend you haven't seen in years. The two of you meet at a busy cafe one morning, and, perching on two uncomfortable bar chairs, you begin a disjointed conversation in between ordering, drinking, and paying for your drinks. The noise in the cafe means you're struggling to hear every word. And as your friend starts telling you about what's been happening in their life for the last 5 years, you realize your attention is drifting, and you're finding the conversation boring. Later, when you get home, you think with some disappointment that the meeting didn't go so well. You used to be great friends, but the meeting earlier that day was so awkward and lacking in connection that you're wondering if it's worth staying in touch at all. So, what happened? The answer is simple: a lack of preparation. Good listening and communication skills, more generally, are things we all take for granted, right up until they're not there, and we sorely feel their absence. Most of us understand that if you're giving a speech, you need to prepare some notes and practice. If you're attending a class, you need to come ready to take notes and pay attention. If you're sitting down to write an important email, you need to take the time to plan it all out. Yet when it comes to communicating, we all seem to assume that this most essential skill will more or less come naturally, without any planning or preparation. While we all recognize the importance of structuring our thoughts and ideas when it comes to speaking, or writing, teaching, etc., we can't forget that there is just as much intentionality required on the other side of things, the listening. The reason we do this is because we think of speaking and writing as active and listening as passive. We imagine that listening is simply not doing. And how many ways can there be of not doing anything, right? This misconception, however, is at the heart of our misunderstanding about how to communicate better. Listening is just as important as speaking, if not more so, and it takes just as much skill, deliberation, and practice. There's nothing obvious or automatic about it. This, then, is where we will start our mission to become more masterful, intelligent communicators. If you're like most people, chances are you've received exactly zilch in the way of formal training in listening skills. That means, sadly, that you've probably picked up plenty of misconceptions and lazy habits yourself over the years. If we continue to think that listening is easy, automatic, and not so important anyway, we will continue to fail to make any efforts to improve. We may encounter good advice that may genuinely help us communicate better, but ignore it, thinking, that doesn't apply to me. I'm actually already a good listener. Listening is frequently seen as an annoyance or a chore. It is undervalued or ignored. Chapter 2. Roadblocks to Masterful Listening. In this chapter, no matter how top-notch your listening skills are, communication can fail if it's hijacked by too much noise. So what are we doing when we listen? We're setting the scene. We're preparing ourselves. We're opening a little space into which a conversation, a genuine conversation, can happen. Well, it sounds easy on paper. Why does it so often go wrong? In this chapter, we'll look at the most common obstacles to quality listening so that you can ensure you're not being derailed by them. We can fail to truly listen when we are too occupied with our own thoughts and feelings, or when we're not open and receptive enough to other people's. But there's another common pitfall to listening that is not acknowledged as often, and it's a simple one: noise. Richard West and Lynn Turner are so interested in the phenomenon of noise in conversations that they've identified 4 different types in their 2010 book on interpersonal communication. Physical noise. Physical noise includes all the external sounds that create interference in the communication process. Picture a scenario where 2 colleagues are trying to discuss an important project in a bustling restaurant during peak time. The background noise of chatter, clinking cups, and the clatter of cooking in the kitchen may all create significant physical noise, making it challenging for the colleagues to hear each other clearly. Add to this the beeping of a phone or the distant hum of construction work outside, and you start to appreciate just how much this obvious type of noise can disrupt effective communication. Importantly, the noise doesn't have to be deafening or literally drown out the other person's voice to be disruptive. Any noise makes a small demand on our attention, and we only have so much bandwidth to process all these different stimuli. The more that goes to random sounds in the environment, the less we have available for the person talking in front of us. Physiological noise. Physiological noise pertains to biological factors that hinder the transmission or reception of messages. Consider an individual with a severe cold attempting to explain a complex idea. The congestion and discomfort associated with the illness become physiological noise, impeding the clarity of their speech and potentially causing the listener to miss key points. Similarly, someone with articulation problems, such as a stutter, faces challenges in expressing themselves clearly, introducing physiological noise that affects the communication exchange. Semantic noise. Semantic noise arises from difficulties in understanding the meaning of words or symbols in communication. You may have trouble hearing the meaning of a sentence due to the jumble of unnecessary verbal clutter in the way. In a professional setting, the use of industry-specific jargon without explanation can create semantic noise, as can excessive politeness, verbosity, or avoidant or circuitous language. For example, Chapter 3, Ask your ego to take a back seat. Interrupting is a power play. In this chapter, without a doubt, the biggest obstacle to high-quality listening is a big fat ego. One of the easiest ways to drop your ego is to unlearn the interrupting habit. People can be poor listeners for a whole host of reasons. They're unprepared for listening and have no plan to do so. They're listening, but in the wrong way for the situation they're in. They're afraid of or uncomfortable with silence. They're trying to listen, but they're getting drowned out by physical, physiological, semantic, or psychological noise. They don't think they need to listen because they already know what's being said. They're too busy thinking of how they'll respond to actually listen to what they're responding to. Granted, all of the above reasons are perfectly human, and most of us have been guilty of one or all of them at one point or another. It's understandable. In this chapter, however, we're exploring some of the less forgivable offenses when it comes to listening, and all of them have to do with one thing: our ego. When we allow our ego to dominate our communication efforts, we are essentially viewing conversation as a competition or even a battle. We see ourselves or our ideas as entering an arena where they must fight and defeat other ideas so that we can ultimately feel that we've won the conversation. What do we win? The feeling that we're superior. Whether this feeling comes from a place of pure narcissism or a place of fear and insecurity. Yes, some of the most self-centered people are deeply vulnerable and anxious. It doesn't matter. The effect on communication is the same. The way we approach communication in general stems from our deeper philosophical attitude to other people in general. Our communication style reflects the relationship we have with ourselves, with other people, with the world in general. It speaks directly to our values, our goals, and our blind spots. Good communicators are fundamentally at peace with themselves and are able to view other people with relaxed interest and genuine respect. They see conversations as pleasant opportunities to learn, to connect, to bond. They do not tend to see difference or the unknown as a threat. Instead, they approach it with humility and curiosity. They are turned outward toward the world. Poor communicators are fundamentally uncomfortable with themselves and are therefore uncomfortable with others, viewing them with suspicion, judgment, or fear. They can't help but see conversations as zero-sum, i.e., the other person is not someone to collaborate with, but to compete with, or even defend against. The unknown is a threat that needs to be conquered. They're turned not outward toward the world, but inward toward themselves. That leads us to one of the biggest threats to healthy communication: interrupting. If you are a poor communicator, you may unconsciously believe that the goal of a conversation is to be the one who speaks the most and brings everyone around to your opinion. That means that any time someone else is speaking, they're with. Chapter 4. Curiosity is king. Stay calm with a curious, active listening mindset. In this chapter, the secret ingredient to next-level listening is a genuine interest, wonder even, in what people have to say. To listen well, we need to remove obstacles and noise, and especially get rid of our own egos. But then, what should take its place? That's easy. Curiosity. Curious active listening is an advanced form of active listening that emphasizes a genuine curiosity and a deep desire to understand the speaker on a profound level. It involves more than just hearing words. It requires being fully present in the moment, engaging with the speaker, and expressing a sincere interest in their thoughts and feelings. Who is this person in front of us, really? What are they actually trying to convey on a deep level? Curious, active listening requires that we deliberately suspend our preconceptions, expectations, and judgments. It also requires that we temporarily set aside our own perspectives so there's space for their perspective to unfold. Granted, you don't need to learn to do this for every encounter with every random stranger you meet, but this mode of listening is an essential skill to develop for those situations where it's really needed. Deep, curious listening enhances relationships in several surprising ways. First, it fosters empathy by enabling individuals to understand and connect with others on a more sincere emotional level. Trust, intimacy, harmony, and real connection are all boosted, and people begin to properly understand one another. That means that not only are conflicts less likely, but should they arise, you're far better prepared to diffuse and resolve them. When both parties feel heard and understood through curious, active listening, tensions diminish. The conversation can more quickly move on to finding solutions rather than potentially generating more grievances. Instead of wasting time and energy defending yourself or going into attack mode, you can quickly get on the same side and start working together on a way forward. There's more, though. Learning to do this kind of listening brings personal benefits, too, including better patience, maturity, and creativity. Learning to pay attention and to read between the lines, for example, by noticing nonverbal communication more, and practicing the art of perspective switching, improves your mental and emotional agility and expands your horizons. It may seem strange, but learning to look at other people more closely can even expand your view to the extent that you're better able to understand yourself in the process. Good listeners, in other words, challenge both their hearts and minds to extend far beyond their ordinary limits, and the benefits are far-reaching. According to Agile Organization Development, you can deliberately use calm, a curious, active listening mindset to help resolve conflicts, negotiate, and give and receive feedback in the workplace. Sharing feedback or airing grievances can be especially tricky since it usually activates people's egos. Chapter 5. Communication and Conflict. Emotional Self-Regulation. In this chapter, the best way to avoid getting into conflict with people is to first learn how to make peace with yourself. When people experience intense emotions like anger, frustration, or anxiety, their bodies initiate a stress response marked by heightened production of stress hormones, leading to increased heart rate, blood pressure, temperature, and breathing rate. These physiological changes often manifest as a short temper, emotional outbursts, mood swings, and a general influx of negative emotions. The implication is clear. If you are not in control of your emotions, they are often in control of you. In everyday encounters, emotional dysregulation is the single greatest threat to communication, whether the dysregulation is theirs or yours. Imagine a Chinese finger puzzle, those little devices where a finger is trapped in each end of a small tube. If you are overcome by your personal experience of stress at being trapped in such a puzzle, you'll waste time struggling and resisting. It's only when you can suspend your automatic emotional reaction long enough to notice what's going on and that you can start to form a strategy to get out of the trap. You do something counterintuitive. Push your fingers together rather than continue to yank them apart, and you're instantly released from the trap. Human connection is similar. When either party is trapped in their own knee-jerk emotional response, they are